Matter at any time I meet anyone in relation to empathy or peace building, I want to also be in that space and be in a space of curiosity with you and learning. I hope that my sharing serves all of us as a way of connecting and hopefully reconnecting post this presentation. The way I wanted to spend time with you today is by sharing. I cannot just come here and share about my accomplishments. I think we can all do that anytime, but I cannot walk away from sharing about my identity, because it is because of the complexities within my identity and the experiences within that is that I am the person I am today, and I am also the person I want to become in the future. So I am the daughter of Salvadorian immigrants. Conflict has been at the center of my life, indirectly and sometimes directly. And this is why peace building has always been part of me as my anchor to navigating the world and relationships, personal and professional. We left our country because of an internal conflict within that country. And if you remember the civil war in El Salvador, and both my parents were involved in civic work. My mom was an educator and my father was a local government official. And to keep us safe, we left when I was at the age of 6 and my sister was at the age of 3. We moved to Baja, Mexico, where right away I was engaged with people who always saw me as an outsider. And that was very difficult for me to navigate so young. So again, the conflicts, the inner conflicts that came about questioning who I was, were present in my life since I was probably in first and second grade. And I had to learn pretty quickly to navigate relationships at school and eventually relationships in communities that I joined as a preteen. I've been involved in community building and with groups through religion my entire life. I was raised Catholic, and that served me really well because I learned a lot about how to really center our common humanity with everything that we do. And like you can see, I'm wearing a veil because now I am a Muslim. I identified as a Muslim American. When I was in Baja, Mexico, I had a great time making friends, but I also understood very early that just like we can come together to common humanity, we can quickly divide ourselves because of misunderstandings or because we don't take the time to get to know each other at a deeper level. So when we immigrated to the United States as a teen, and I began to interface with very diverse groups in Southern California, where I spent a lot of my youth and my young adult life, I realized that professionally, I wanted to make a difference. I'm from a family of educators. My mom is a former teacher, a former small town principal in El Salvador. So I knew I was going to be in education. I became private school teacher, where peace building, even if it wasn't called peace building, and social justice was at the center of the work we did in inner city private schools. We serve a lot of children who were hungry for knowledge and success, but that society continued to impede that for them for one reason or another. I mean, that's for a separate conversation, but you can imagine the obstacles that these families were going through to get their students education. And I was part of that world for many years, close to 15 years in Southern California, deep in the inner cities, communities, working with grassroots organizations and helping create access for families, specifically immigrant families, in private education, creating spaces for them to succeed and be seen and be valued. And that was really my teacher. Those experiences really helped me get stronger and solidify and affirm who I was more and more, the more I got involved in this type of peace building activities in those communities. And 12 years ago, I moved to the Bay Area. And after I had spent time being a school teacher and a school principal in inner city, I decided to work for private independent schools, which is the flip of the coin. Now I'm working with schools that have absolutely everything you can think of: resources, funding, human capital, access to absolutely everything you can think under the sun for these students. And yet the word conflict was present as well. And not because of just conflicted individuals, but because when I've noticed when young people and adults come into contact with differences, again, when we don't take the time to move beyond the surface, conflict arises, misunderstandings arises, hurt and pain takes over, and division is present. So I became a diversity, equity, and inclusion director for that reason, to be close to social justice work in private schools, to bring awareness and opportunities to make a real concrete difference in our local communities and in our national communities around these topics with the resources that we had access to. And I have enjoyed that ride tremendously. But it's not, I wasn't done. I felt like something was missing. I miss working with grassroots organizations besides having an 8-to-5 job in private schools. So on and off, I reconnected with local organizations here in the Bay Area to do some civic work around peace building and working with team cohesion type of peace building and restorative practices type of trainings. And I really enjoy that time in working with communities here. So I decided to open my new consultancy, which is just now launching, and it's called Peacebuilding Creations. And Peacebuilding Creations, the name came to me pretty quickly. The word peace building came relatively quickly to me. As a peace builder myself, I think that we all have the capacity to be peace builders, and some of us have been peace builders without the title our entire lives. Simple, common people have been making a difference in their communities without, you know, the huge titles and the big offices. And that's what I'm about. I'm about meeting people where they're at and bringing the best versions of themselves to come together and make, you know, impact in their immediate surroundings and beyond. And that takes time and effort, and it's relational. And that's what Peace Building Creations is about. It's not about hiring a consultant like me to go and do a one-off. I don't subscribe to that. I want to be part of a movement of organizations and teams who want to fully commit to long-lasting relationship building with their members, to create better environments for everybody who is part of their communities, and to provide not only opportunities for individuals to fulfill their dreams, but to also teach others how to fulfill theirs. I think I'm a firm believer of paying it forward through peace building. And this is why I'm so curious in joining communities like yours and groups like yours to learn about your individual experiences and how your own insights and life experiences can help pay it forward and continue to like make this group of peace building experts, you know, a larger community, like some of you were saying, just like we have other departments at the government level, whatnot, one dedicated to peace building and restoring relationships at a larger scale. So now that I told you a little bit about my personal story, I wanted to share some images. And I don't want this to be a very formal interaction with us, but I'm a visual learner. And when I have an image in front of me, I can probably provide a bit more context of what I'm trying to communicate. So I hope you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. And I put together a presentation very quickly with just a few slides, just to contextualize where I am right now, what my truth is right now, what comes to me today in terms of where I want to be in the next 3 to 5 years professionally, by immersing myself in the communities that I serve. Now that I share a little bit about my life journey, this is, I mean, I don't want to tell my age, but it's a lot of years of interacting with people from all walks of life, and from working and volunteering in inner city communities to working and volunteering in upscale communities and everything in between. I realized that if we don't put the time to work in our own inner work, inner growth, we won't have the capacity to serve others. That's just bottom line. And so if we ourselves don't find ways to find inner peace, and I know there are lots of definitions and a lot of literature around this topic, it's just, for me, impossible to sustain our ability to support others. So we gotta take care of that, right? We gotta take care of ourselves. You know, we talk, it's super popular right now when we talk about self-care. Self-care, it became viral, that whole expression, especially post-COVID-19, for a lot of reasons. But besides the self-care, I'm talking here about inner peace, and that can be challenging to keep with us at all times. And I don't expect us to, but to always look for ways to accept what you can control, what you cannot control around your environment, to always be grateful and show gratitude to others, and to forgive yourself first before you engage in restorative practices with groups or individuals that you might come across, you know, into conflict or have difference of opinions with. Learn to also be kind to yourself and figuring out different ways to always try to get to that balanced space. I think I could have added more circles to these. This is something I created quickly to share with my networks, because I've experienced this for circles, sometimes simultaneously. On the flip coin of this, if you look at the opposite of the negative side of each of these words, I've experienced all of that simultaneously in variety of situations. And it's hard when you are not in a space of inner peace. It is so hard. It's painful, it hurts, and especially when you blame yourselves for everything that's coming at you. So I'm here to invite you to continue in this work of peace building by looking for ways to be in that space of inner peace first. And all of you can probably, if we had the time, can share how you get to that point on a daily basis, a weekly basis, which will be an amazing exercise to put together for all of us in the future, and share how we do that. And another aspect of my reflection, my inner reflection as in my professional life, is that I feel that as we continue to look inward, that I think these are 5 personal factors that affect our perception. I'm sure there's more than 5, in literature tells us that more than 5, and there could be subcategories under each of these things. And we can have a series of presentations for each of these circles, right? When I think of mood, I'm thinking of how we handle information and relationships or circumstances that come at us. They can either expand our knowledge or impede for us to be open, and we can close up, you know. And our belief sets, there's nothing wrong with our belief set. It is your belief set. It is what that is part of you since you were very young. Can your belief sets shift through circumstance and life experiences? Of course. But when you show up fully in a space, you come in with your belief sets, and you need to be aware of that as you're interpreting what's in front of you, and your value sets as well, which determines what's right and what's wrong from your perspective. When you're sitting across the room with others, and you are observing, and you're listening, and you are taking in what's coming at you in terms of information, knowledge, skills, emotions, your value sets are going to determine whether you're going to judge it. There's just no other way. We judge all the time what comes at us. It's part of who we are, and nothing's wrong with that. But having that self-awareness, and of course, we show up with our lived experiences. I share a little bit about mine. I would never walk in a room and say, I'm going to leave that part of me outside this space. I come in with all of me, with all my scars, with all my open wounds, and with all my blessings. And the last one are the biases that sometimes, not sometimes, but I would say at all times, are playing a role of helping us sometimes misinterpret or misjudging the intentions or of people who might be trying to interact with us and connect with us. All of that, what I suppose here, can keep us, move us towards peace, and can also keep us away from peace. So by having some self-awareness about these factors and how they affect our perception, I think we can just turn that awareness at all times and be present fully as we interact with one another and interface in this world. I think that would help us hopefully prevent moving into a conflict. I'm telling you all this because in my work, I sometimes spend a lot of time teaching, quote unquote, workshops or a series of retreats around the topic of beliefs and values. And through that, these other circles always come up first, you know, how you show up, how the entry point to a conversation, how do you feel about a conversation or a topic, or something that happened right before you came in, or how your past experiences are helping you judge the future experiences. And, you know, or your lack of information or our lack of information about something can create a bias that can, again, divide. And unless we don't talk about this, it's almost very difficult to restore the harmony and the peace that I think we all seek and we're hungry for. I'm not going to go into this a lot because I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard about restorative practices, and this is an adaptation of what restorative practices are all about. But if we do choose to engage in restorative practices, processes, we hope that we come into that space in the spirit of restoring a relationship, into growing from that conflict that brought us together in the first place, to try to restore harmony and peace for ourselves and the people that we want to maintain that relationship with. And so I created this hierarchy image just to for us to visualize how at the bottom, sometimes we can spend years in that phase and not move upward, because it's hard for us to say, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about what divides us. And I think in my work, I feel like if we're able to have that willingness to talk about it, just kind of show up with some, obviously, with some preparation and with some guidance, we can move upward and begin to activate our communication skills and our listening deeply skills to continue to move upward, to get to a point where we're like, come up with something that can work for all of us involved and learn and grow from that. And that in itself, it's what I tried now to develop and create spaces for myself and others in my inner circle, in my personal life and in my professional life. It's like, if we're going to come together, we're all in agreement that we genuinely want to be vulnerable with one another. And that can take time and it can show up differently for people. But that is like number one, agreement. And unless we're not in that space, it's hard to move to the next phases of reconciliation. And that's what Peace Building Creations is all about. Right now, for me, I'm a one-person consultancy, and that is basically where I'm moving towards. After working 30 years in education, I feel like this is the space I want to be in, and this is the types of conversations I want to join, and the type of activities I want to be part of with people and learn more about how we can together enhance a lot of what I shared today and more. I want to finish by just sharing this is an organizational chart of Peace Building Creations, and what's here is not unique, right? Even Peace Alliance is probably structured similarly in some ways. But when I think about how I am a one-person consultancy, my dream is that in the next 3 to 5 years, I will partner with some of you and others and build this amazing team of experience and expert peace builders who can help in the different areas of conflict resolution, conflict prevention, peace building programs, peace education, which at the heart is where my expertise comes from being in education for so many years. And to, like some of you said, moving beyond our walls and look upward and how we can partner with other organizations internationally. And for me, the last category, which is of the last block or series of black to brown area called Peace Building Ambassadors Training. I'm a firm believer that that ripple effect that I talked about earlier, the part about paying it forward. Yes, we can pay it forward with a similar structure than this one and others that you can think of and that you're probably already part of. But if we are not building capacity to repeat this type of structures at a larger scale, then it's just kind of us talking to each other, right? And I'm sure I'm guilty of sometimes, like, how many months have I spent with my inner circle of peace builders, and we're like celebrating each other, and that's awesome because that keeps you awake and re-energized. But it's like, yeah, but we're here to make a greater impact. So for that, we need some skill building, right? This is not easy work. It's relational. It's about humans with humans coming together with their differences. So I think the last portion is about creating that capacity for more leadership. Even like some DJ was mentioning at the government level, to repeat some of these structures locally, city-wise, state-wise, national-wise, and then obviously international. And why all of this? Because ultimately, I think as peace builders, we're here to build peace. We are peacekeepers already, right? Because if we're hopefully in a space where there's no peace, we're going to try to keep it, maintain it, but we also want to build it. So we're not always taking out fires when there's conflict, but that we're preventing conflict from happening. And that can only happen if we expand our web of knowledge and we create a space for other leadership to come up to the tops and help us do the work. I hope my dreams are not too impossible to accomplish. And but I'm positive and I'm energized and I'm willing to put the work in. That's all for me.
Centered on the internal part, which I'm all about. And I don't know, I've just liked it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Bill. Yes, your initial commentary about your own struggles or your own self-awareness of who you are, and that was like, oh my God, that is so much what I do all the time and I talked about. So that was inspiring when you shared that earlier at the beginning. Thank you. Yes, I'll share a story from years ago. I was a young teacher and I became the president of one of the nonprofits in Los Angeles that led a lot of immigration rights work for Central Americans who in the 90s were trying to gain citizenship, and there was no law to protect Salvadorians from becoming citizens because of the war. All of us were trying to gain American citizenship through other means, and those laws had a lot of limitations. So I joined that organization and I became the president of that organization. And that organization had another wing, per se, another office in El Salvador with their own infrastructure and office, etc. And we were fundraising in Los Angeles for a housing project after one of the devastating earthquakes that happened in El Salvador in the 90s. And I have been away from my own country since I left. If you remember, my story said I left when I was sick and I never came back. As a young president of a nonprofit organization that was basically doing immigration law work in Los Angeles, I was unaware of the inner group conflicts that were happening between the two offices. But all I knew is that they put me in a plane and they asked me to restoratively figure out a way for the local leadership of a town where we were building the houses to stop the project because they were not happy about a variety of things that were, irregularities or whatever that was going on locally there on behalf of our project. So I remember very young thinking, well, I'm going to go into a room with a bunch of strangers who are upset at us already. And the only way for me to engage with them if we can see each other as human beings and be willing to engage in that space with the goal of getting common agreement. So I met with one of the government officials first one-on-one. I asked him if he was willing to show up in that way in a meeting, and took a while. So sometimes through restorative practices, you have to work on the sidelines with the individuals first to help them get into a space where they're generally willing to come in conversations about the conflict first. And that's like the bottom part of the hierarchy that I show you. And then once we show up in the meeting, then it's really getting to the bottom of what is the problem. Let's not talk about, yes, let's open the space to talk about the symptoms, but the problem itself was that we were taking too long to finish the houses and people were getting ready to move in and the fundraising was not coming to us fast enough and the houses were half built and some people have moved in without roof over their heads and they were worried about their safety locally. And we were in Los Angeles just trying to fundraise the money. That was the conflict. That was the problem. And so once we named it, we took responsibility for what was our take and things that we could control. And the government officials came around and taking responsibility for what they could have handled better as well, in terms of bringing the, the problem to our attention and how they handle the situation locally. I moved the conversation, it was a group of about 10 people, to common agreements. And I said, we're going to come up with common agreements, and we're going to get out of here, and we're going to take care of these common agreements separately and together. And we're going to give ourselves some timeline, and we're going to follow up. And I think that follow-up piece is what was really welcome, because it was tangible. We knew exactly where to communicate, how to communicate with who, in what ways. And that was clear at that meeting. So we had a map and how we were going to engage with one another to try to come to a solution of this problem together. And it comes up that through that meeting, we the team from Los Angeles, came up with fresh ideas in how to go back and tell our story to our funders and donors, excuse me, who were donating the funds for this housing, and tell the story differently to get a greater impact. And it worked. And I think when the team in El Salvador realized, oh my gosh, the common agreements were followed through, and we actually did what we said we were going to do, both of us, and we were celebrating milestones along the way, that creating that restorative piece, and we were able to work together. So we learned a lot through this conflict process of resolving it, which is like the top tier, is like you learn, and then we grew. I became a better leader for the organization, and the members of both teams became better communicators, and more importantly, more empathetic for one another. And we got to build relationships throughout the process. So that was amazing. And so that was why I was always inspired by restorative practices movements, because it works. It just takes time, and you just got to continue to stay engaged. And I think it's important to not fall too far away from let's not overpromise. Let's keep it practical, and let's take one step at a time on the follow through. And that's more at a project level, but at the professional level, students in the playground, they engage in conflict sometimes all the time, just through play. It happens, it's natural. But giving them the skills to restore that relationship with one another without necessarily a mediator, a teacher in between, somebody who's watching the yard with them to be the one to solve the problem for them. But for them, we provide them with language and tools for them to engage in that restorative conversation with one another. Obviously, the older they get, the better they exercise this. And that's also beautiful to watch, because in education, yes, you want to teach the students things, but you want them to, again, be able to be independent thinkers and be able to say, hey, I didn't like how you talked to me today on the yard. Can we talk about it later? Like that's, even yesterday, I was walking through the halls, and that's exactly what I heard. They were making an appointment to talk about something that one kid got bothered by an hour before. They were going to talk about it later. And I know they will talk about it and get through all these steps to get to common agreements and really restore the harmony and peace between them and keep that relationship intact.
I enjoyed the presentation and just the whole idea of constructively uniting, to build peace across, the whole spectrum of things, and just normalizing it more so, like she said, instead of just, you don't want to really wait to build the fire department. You understand, when we're having a fire, so it's already there, it already exists for that particular purpose. So this is kind of a way of like building a whole fire department, if you will, so that, you already have everything in place as these issues come up. So I actually like that. I love the presentation and the whole concept. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your affirmation.